A man can spend 30 years building something with his hands and never once raise his voice. And then one Tuesday morning, a stranger with my daughter's last name taught me that the quietest men are the ones you should never underestimate. I built $88,000, one small deposit at a time, for 2 children who still believe Grandpa can fix anything. He drained it in 91 days. He thought I'd never notice. He was wrong about that, and he was wrong about me. Welcome to Dad's Revenge. Pull up a chair, friend, if you've got a cup of coffee going, this is a good one to sit with. If stories about family, loyalty, and the price of crossing a good man mean something to you, do me a favor and comment, like, and subscribe before we get into it. It helps more than you know. Here, let me back up. My name is Walter Kessler. I'm 68 years old. I live on Linden Avenue in Dayton, Ohio, in the same brick house my wife Diane and I bought in 1981, back when a mortgage payment was $94 a month and I thought that was steep. I spent 41 years as a machinist, and now that I'm retired I fix small engines out of my garage, lawnmowers, chainsaws, the occasional old motorcycle somebody drags in on a trailer. I coach Little League on Saturdays too, have for 22 years. I'm telling you all this so you understand the kind of man I am. Steady. Slow to anger. And here's my flaw, the one Diane used to tease me about: I give people the benefit of the doubt long past the point I should. I trust the story a man tells me about himself. That trust is the most expensive thing I own. It cost me $88,000. Believe me, I know that now. Let me tell you about my grandkids. Emma is 9. Cole is 7. Emma's got Diane's laugh, the exact one, the one that starts low and climbs, and every time I hear it, my wife is in the room again for about 4 seconds. Cole calls me every Sunday at 6 to ask a question he's been saving all week. Last week it was whether a shark could beat a bear. I said depends on the water, and he thought that was the wisest thing a human being had ever said. Those two are the whole reason I get up in the morning. Diane passed in the spring of 2019. And after that I made myself a promise standing right there at her gravesite at Woodland Cemetery. I promised her I'd take care of those kids no matter what came. So I started the trust. $88,000, built over 5 years out of my pension and my engine money, 20 here, 500 there. College money. A future I'd never see but could still build. Now let me tell you about Trent. Trent married my daughter Rachel in 2016. Good-looking fella, firm handshake, always had a deal working real estate, crypto, some vending machine business for a while. He'd sit at my kitchen table and talk about the vision, and I'd nod and pour more coffee, because Rachel loved him and the kids adored him, and who was I to doubt a man for dreaming big? That's her father talking. That's the flaw again. I wanted to like him. So I did. Tuesday, March 4th, 10:17 in the morning. I remember because I was in the garage draining oil out of a Briar Ridge mower when the mail came. Most of it was junk. But there was one envelope from Fifth Third Bank, addressed to me, about the trust account. A routine statement, I figured. I set it on the workbench and finished the mower first, because that's the kind of man I am. I finished the job in front of me. Then I washed my hands, sat down on the stool, and opened it. The balance was $2,140. I read it 3 times. I thought it was a mistake. A decimal in the wrong place, some bank error, something. $88,000 does not become $2,000. Not in the account I set up. Not in an account only I was supposed to touch. So I called the bank, and a young man named Devin pulled up the history while I stood in my kitchen with my heart going like a hammer, and he read me a list of withdrawals going back 3 months. Wire transfers. Cashier's checks. All authorized, he said, by my signature on file. My signature. On documents I had never seen. Never signed. Here's the thing about a forged signature, and I want you to sit with this for a second. It's not just theft. Anybody can steal money. A forged signature is somebody wearing your name like a mask to do the very thing you'd have died to stop. He didn't just take the money. He took my hand and made it sign the papers for him. 91 days of it. And every one of those days I'd been coaching baseball and calling Cole back about sharks and having no idea. I didn't yell. I want you to understand that. I sat down at the kitchen table where I'd poured that man coffee for 8 years, and I got very, very quiet. Diane always said the quiet was the part to watch out for. Over the next 2 weeks I pieced it together, slow, the way you take apart an engine you don't want to break worse. The first withdrawal was January 9th, a wire for $12,000. I found out later that was the same week Trent's vending business folded and a man he owed came around asking questions. Then the withdrawals got bigger and closer together. February, 3 of them. He'd opened the door once and just kept walking through. I called Rachel, careful, casual, asked how things were, how Trent's business was going. She said great. Never better. She had no idea. I could hear it in her voice, she genuinely had no idea what her husband was doing with her children's future. And I made a decision right there not to tell her yet. Not out of cruelty. Because I only had one shot at this, and I wasn't going to fire it half-cocked. Let me tell you about Ruthin now, because you need one good person in a story like this or you'll lose faith in people entirely. Ruthin Delgado is the branch manager at the Fifth Third on Wilmington Pike, been there 31 years. When I came in with that statement, she didn't give me a runaround. She looked at the withdrawal slips, then she looked at me, and she said, Mr. Kessler, that is not the same signature twice, and neither one is yours. She pulled the surveillance stills of who cashed the cashier's checks herself. She stayed 40 minutes past closing to print records for me. She didn't have to do any of that. She did it because it was right, and she did it instantly, without being asked twice. I have thought about Ruth and Delgado 100 times since. There are still people who do the right thing the moment it's in front of them, no hesitation, no calculation. She was one. He was the other kind. The contrast told me everything about both of them. If you've been listening this far, do us one quick favor. Subscribe, it costs you nothing and it means everything to us. Hit that like button and drop your thoughts in the comments. It tells me you're still in that chair with me, and I'll tell you the truth, it keeps me telling these. Now stay with me, because this is where it turns. I did not call Trent. I did not drive to his house. I did not do a single one of the things a younger, hotter version of me would have done. Instead, on Thursday, March 13th, I drove downtown to the office of a lawyer named Harold Pruitt, an estate attorney a friend from church had used, 71 years old with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead and a handshake dry as sandpaper. I laid the whole thing on his desk. He looked through it slow, not saying much. When he finished he took the glasses off and said, Walter, you did the smartest thing you could have done. You didn't warn him. And then he told me what patience buys you. It buys you the truth, documented, before the other man knows he's being watched. Rage warns your enemy. Patience closes the trap. I chose patience. I want you to remember that, because it's the whole thing right there. Harold brought in a forensic document examiner, a woman named Priscilla Nguyen out of Columbus, does this for courts, been doing it 26 years. She took my real signatures, dozens of them, checks in my driver's license and the original trust papers, and she laid them next to the forgeries under magnification. Then we pulled every record. The bank surveillance stills. The wire confirmations with the IP address they'd been sent from Trent's own home computer, the fool. The dates lined up one by one against his failing business like a confession he didn't know he was writing. We didn't rush. We spent 6 weeks building it. 6 weeks where I coached baseball and answered Cole's Sunday calls and said not one word. Every night I'd add one more piece to the folder on my workbench, next to the wrenches, and close the garage door, and go to bed. Precise. Patient. Complete. I'll tell you the truth, the patience nearly broke me. Every family dinner, watching him laugh at my table with the money already gone, was its own small hell. But I'd built engines my whole life. You do not force the part. You seat it right, and you tighten it in order, and you do not skip a step. So I didn't. The payoff came through the front door on the letterhead of the Montgomery County Prosecutor's Office. Harold walked the whole file over himself. Forgery of a financial instrument, and grand theft, both felonies in Ohio, both carrying real time. The evidence was so clean there was nothing to argue. On May 29, two detectives arrested Trent in his own driveway, in front of the neighbors, in the middle of the afternoon. No sirens. Just a quiet knock and a pair of handcuffs and a car door closing. The court froze what was left of his accounts and entered a restitution order for the full $88,000, secured against the equity in his house, the house Rachel would keep in the divorce she filed 11 days later, once she'd seen the file with her own eyes and gone dead silent for a very long time on the other end of the phone. Every dollar came back to that trust. Every dollar. He fell, and he fell through the exact system he thought a good handshake could talk his way around. No violence. None needed. Paper beats a liar every time, if you're patient enough to stack it. I saw him one last time. June 20th, in a hallway outside courtroom 4B, both of us waiting, 10 feet apart. He looked bad. Smaller. He came over and started in low and fast, "Walter, come on, we're family, I was going to pay it all back." I panicked, you know me. And I let him finish. Then I stood up, and I want you to understand my voice did not rise 1 inch. I said, "Trent, I poured you coffee at my table for 8 years. I defended you to people who saw you clearer than I did. And you took the money I built for your own children and you signed my name to it while you smiled at me on Sundays." He said something about the kids, using them, the way his kind always does at the end. And I said the only thing left to say. I said, "I'm not doing this for me. I've got nothing left to protect. You already took the only thing I trusted you with. There's nothing you can threaten anymore." He didn't have an answer. For the first time in 8 years, that man had nothing working. And I watched it land on him, not the arrest, not the money, but the actual size of what he'd thrown away. A family that would have carried him. A father-in-law who'd have given him the coat off his back. Gone. I turned around and walked out into the parking lot, and I felt the sun on my face, and I drove home and finished a carburetor I'd left on the bench. Emma and Cole's college money is whole again. It sits in a new trust now, at a new bank, with 2 signatures required for anything and neither of them Trent's. Cole still calls every Sunday at 6. Last week he asked me if grandpas ever get scared. I told him yes. I told him the trick isn't not being scared. The trick is being quiet, and being patient, and being right, and then not backing down an inch when the moment finally comes. He trusted my kindness and mistook it for weakness. A lot of men make that same mistake about quiet fathers. He learned. He knew my signature. He never knew my spine. If you enjoyed this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. And as always, thank you for being a part of Dad's Revenge. I'll see you on the next.